Mr. Mayor, we're now live.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this meeting of Ajax Council is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and senior town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout the meeting. I'll now call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island and the Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the Williams Treaties First Nations. This place is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples. Let's move forward together with kindness and respect. Moving on to the agenda. Does any member of council have any disclosure of pecuniary interest?
No.
Hearing none. Moving on to the minutes. I have moved by Councillor Tyler Morin, seconded by Councillor Dyes, that the minutes of the meeting of council held on May 19th be adopted. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Being none, those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
Sorry,
That's
just to
carried.
clarify, Chair, you can see us, correct?
I can see you, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to question period, I've been notified by the clerk that no member of the public submitted any questions. Moving on to delegations presentations, there's no delegations and presentations. Moving on to items of correspondence. Do we have any polls in the correspondence?
Yes, Chair. I would like to
Hold
pull, sorry.
Okay, Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pull item 7 to receive for information, please.
Okay. On item 7, any others? Being none, we have moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Khan, that the report dated June 15th containing items of correspondence be adopted. That's for 1 through 6, not including 7, which has been pulled. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Those first 6 are passed. Councillor Bauer, correspondence item 7.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring to attention the material that was submitted by the Seniors for Social Action of Ontario. I think it's very timely, as we all know. Issues of level of care, conditions, funding, staffing, etc. In long-term care facilities has always been an issue, and I don't think it's ever been brought to light or the forefront as powerfully or as tragically as right now during the pandemic. I think we can agree that this system is broken and it certainly needs to be looked at, investigated, and changed. So I think this report really comes up with some great recommendations from some experts. And I know that the province has called for an investigation, and that is a process, and we need to follow and honor that process. But I do hope that some of the recommendations in this report will be, I guess, agreed upon or will be similar to what the province will discover. So I just wanted to bring that up to everyone's attention because I think it's important.
If I may,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead,
It's
Councillor Dyes.
Joanne. Thank you. And just wanted to add to that, it was amazing information in that email that we received. And because it's correspondence, I just want to make sure through the clerk that this can be forwarded to the region and to the other area municipalities within Durham region, because there is a lot of great information, particularly about younger people being placed in long-term care homes as well, and seniors retirement homes. So I think there's a huge learning curve there for anybody who picks it up and reads it, and I really appreciated that. So I just want to make sure that that can be forwarded.
Okay, I think the clerk has that direction, but Madam Clerk?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will certainly forward that on to the region and to the other municipalities within Durham.
Thank you.
Okay, will you, Councillor Bauer, Councillor Dyes, move and second that receive for information?
Happily, yes.
Yes.
Okay. If there's nothing further on that item, receive for information. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to reports. We have just one report, General Government Committee from last Monday, moved by Councillor Bauer, second by Councillor Crawford, that the General Government Committee report dated June 8th, 2020 be adopted. Any questions or comments on the report from last Monday's meeting? Being none, those in favor of approval? Any opposed? That is carried. Departmental reports. Mr. Romanowski, is there any presentation on this or just questions?
To the mayor, no formal presentations on any of the planning matters. However,
Okay.
we can take questions going forward.
Perfect. So departmental report 7.4.1. Thank you for that, Jeff. Development charge deferral agreement for 35-37 Kings Crescent, which is the Salvation Army site. We have moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Tyler Morin, that the attached development charge deferral agreement be endorsed by council. Do we have any questions or comments on the report? Being none,
Just one
I'm just happy to see this going forward. So, sorry, who's that?
It was Joanne. I just have one comment. I just
Go ahead,
wanted to
Joanne.
thank you. I just wanted to thank staff for the work they've been doing on this. It's taken a long time, and I'm really, really happy to see that we're finally getting there. So I guess it's going to take a couple of years, but I really do appreciate this coming forward to get them moving on it. So thank you.
Perfect. I think we can all echo that comment.
Yeah.
Anything further on this item? Being none, those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that's carried. Moving on to departmental reports. Item 7.4.2, potential options at Harwood Avenue North and Haskell Avenue. This was moved by Councillor Khan, seconded by Councillor Lee, that the report entitled Potential Options at Harwood Avenue North and Haskell Avenue be received for information. Any questions?
Mayor?
Councillor Khan?
Yes, can I get a brief summary from Mr. Romanowski or Mr. Grieve on exactly where we are with this?
Yes.
Mr. Romanowski?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Khan, I can have John provide you a brief, less than 5-minute rundown of the options that have been put forward in the report, if you'd like.
Yes, I would love that, please. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Jeff, and to the mayor and other members of council. So the report before you is in response to the motion staff received from May 19 to look at various options. Within the report, we present two possible crossing options that could be considered by council. The first is a pedestrian crossing. The second is full signalization. The report goes into detail about what those crossing options would look like. We provided example imagery on their look. We then did a signal warrant analysis. The purpose of doing that is we did have 2019 data that was collected and wanted to test that. The analysis showed that under existing traffic conditions, the signal warrant is met. The significance of this is that previous tests had shown under existing volume, the warrant had not been met yet. And if the town had decided to proceed with signalization in advance of meeting this warrant, the region has additional requirements that are needed to be met in order for signalization. So the fact that we now have existing volume that meets the warrant, the process with the region to have a signal installed is simplified. The report goes on to speak about the Harwood widening EA, in which the costs of a signal had been included as part of that project. Is at the time of the consideration for the widening in the ITMP, it was future traffic volumes that triggered the need for that signalization. So there's some additional information about that project and the requirements behind it. And then finally, the report gives a very high level preliminary cost estimate for the the two crossing options presented. At a high level, we believe the pedestrian crossing would cost approximately $85,000, whereas a full traffic signal would cost approximately $350,000. And then we note at the final piece of our report that neither projects have been budgeted for at this point or included in the long-range capital forecast. There was an intent by staff to introduce the EA associated with the widening of Harwood into this year's long-range capital forecast during budget discussions later this fall. So that's a very high level review, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mayor. What would be the timeline for something like this to take place? And we're looking at the pedestrian crossing, of course.
Can I just clarify through the mayor to Councillor Khan? Do you mean specifically timeline to build out one of the options?
Yes.
Okay. John?
Through the mayor to Councillor Khan, to design and construct a pedestrian crossing, I would anticipate it would be likely 4 to 6 months would be my high level estimate at this time. We would need to retain a designer to design the ultimate crossing. Would then need to go through procurement and construction. If we're able to do that design process with enough speed, we may be able to get construction done in this construction season. If there were any delays, it may be pushed into next year's construction season. But without delay and with an expedited process, I would estimate 4 to 6 months.
John, thank you for that. Upon the widening of Harwood Avenue, if you were to invest into this crossing, is there any way that this will not be a throwaway, that it will be incorporated into the widening so we don't lose money or all the money, so to speak? Because as you know, it's something that's kind of urgent. As you know, I've had a close colleague got run over by a truck, actually, who's actually brain hemorrhaging right now. And it has gotten very urgent right now, and I'm ready to move forward on it. So I would like to know if there's anything that can be done if we were to move forward with the pedestrian crossing, that it is important that it's not a throwaway upon the widening of Harwood Avenue. Is that an option?
So with relation to the crossing itself, it would have to be removed in favor or in replacement of a signal, because the proposed crossing isn't a suitable solution for a 4-lane cross section. However, there are some costs that aren't throwaway. So like the physical signs and other elements, there's a flashing beacon that is part of the crossing. Those could be saved and could be used at future locations in town, should we have identify those. So there is some hard infrastructure cost that wouldn't be a throwaway. When I reference throwaway costs in the report, it's more so, the costs associated with the design, some of the pavement marking costs, those can't be recouped, and those would be a sort of a one-time cost for us that would be kind of removed when we proceeded with the widening. But the hard infrastructure that we would need, signs, lights, could be saved and reused at a future project, therefore lowering the cost of a future project.
Okay, thank you, John. Now, in the interim of this process, can anything at all be done for the protection of our residents? Anything in the interim?
In the interim, no, nothing that would be appropriate under the guidance we receive from through the Ontario Traffic Manuals and with the Highway Traffic Act to do a appropriate crossing. This is the type of crossing that would be required.
I see. Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion moving forward, but I think Councillor Crawford has a question. Would you
You
How do-
can still move your amendment now,
All right.
and we can still, councilors can ask questions on the amendment and on the main motion.
Okay, so can I go ahead and make the amendment that the report entitled Potential Options at Harwood Avenue North and Haskell Avenue be endorsed, and that this report be referred to the capital budget process to be included in the Harwood Avenue widening?
Yes, and that's an amendment.
Yes.
So we're changing from receive for information to be endorsed and referring this to capital budget
Yes,
as
Mayor.
part of the Harwood widening.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Is that right? Okay. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Ash, or do you want to just leave that for questions?
I will leave that for questioning. Thank you, Mayor.
So the amendment is to endorse and refer to budget. Any questions on the amendment? Councillor Crawford?
My question was to the report. Is it possible to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
My question was around the pedestrian crossover. Is that signalized?
Mr. Green?
Through the
So-
mayor, through the chair to Councillor Crawford. It's not signalized, but it's a flashing pedestrian activated PXO crosswalk. John, I believe it's similar to the one that's on Ritchie Avenue, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. So there's a pedestrian activated flashing beacon that under the Highway Traffic Act, vehicles are required to stop when those beacons are activated and pedestrians are within the crosswalk.
So it is not like the one on Church Street where Pickering High School is, where it actually stops traffic?
That is correct. The signal that is at on Church Street in front of the high school is a mid-block signal.
Is there any way that a signal like that could be put up at Haskell's? Sorry, is that the name of the street? Sorry.
Pascal.
Haskell, sorry. Is it possible to have that put up there?
Yes, theoretically, yes, it could be. It would obviously have a greater cost, but yes, through a design process and looking at the options, I believe you could simply install signal heads in the facing the north-south direction that would stop traffic and provide the pedestrian protection.
So I'm curious then, traffic then on Church Street, would you say that there's more traffic on Church Street, less traffic on Church Street than on Harwood at this particular intersection?
There is more. I would guess almost double
At Harwood?
than this location in Harwood. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Church Street is in the order of about 10,000 vehicles a day in that location, and Harwood, I believe, is 6,000 or 7,000 vehicles in a day.
That's
Both through.
big.
So there is significantly more traffic on Church Street.
And we don't, and I guess I'm just, I'm curious, you're the expert, that a pedestrian signal like you're suggesting would in fact, I know it's supposed to, as the traffic law says, that traffic is supposed to stop, but are you convinced that that would actually be effective rather than an actual stop light?
In its current two-lane configuration, I believe the PXO, the pedestrian crossing as proposed, could be effective. Yes.
And then after it's widened?
We would be required to go to the full signalized intersection, as noted in the report.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I apologize if I missed that. All right, no, that's, I would agree with the amendment as put forward with Councillor Khan. That's a significant amount of traffic, and safety we have to keep in mind for all of our pedestrians, obviously. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I have
Thank you. Any?
Mayor Collier, I have
Yep.
one question that I just want to seek some clarification from Councillor Khan on.
Go ahead.
Councillor Khan, can you be specific as to, are you looking for the signals or the PXO? And do you want such infrastructure looked at through the budget, through the widening project, or on its own?
I think on its own.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? One of the things here is, which ties into this, that I mentioned to Councillor Khan before the meeting, was we have a minister zoning order request in place on a property just up from this that may trigger or advance the widening of Harwood. And so I think that's why we're talking, there wasn't one or the other. It was a matter of refer it to the Harwood widening project. And, you know, if it's advanced, you go the one way. If it's not advanced, you go the other way, was what my understanding was. Was that correct? Councillor Khan?
Yes, yes, Mayor. Yes, that was correct.
Okay.
Right.
Does that make sense, Mr. Romanowski?
I would assume so. I just want to make sure that staff has proper direction in how we're going to deal with whatever direction Councillor Khan wants us to deal with this particular item.
Okay.
So we just need clear direction. What are we doing and when are we doing it?
Okay. Go ahead.
Has this amendment been put in writing anywhere, just so that we can actually visually
Yeah.
see it, or?
Thank you.
Point of
Mr.
order, do we
Clerk,
need
could
do we need a seconder for the amendment as well?
Yes, a second will be
we
required.
do
So
need a
I
seconder.
will second that, just for the record.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harris, did you write down the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a written copy of the amendment, but if
Okay.
Councillor Khan would like to read it out again, I can type as we go.
You got it. I'll start now. That the report entitled Potential Options at Harwood Avenue North and Haskell Avenue be endorsed, and that this report be referred to the capital budget process to be included in the Harwood Avenue widening.
So,
Pardon me for a second. Could you do that again, Councillor Khan?
Yes, that the report entitled Potential Options at Harwood Avenue North and Haskell Avenue be endorsed, and that this report.
Hold on.
Okay, sorry. Be endorsed.
Okay.
And that this report be referred to the capital budget process to be included in the Harwood Avenue widening.
so I have a question to the amendment, Mayor.
Okay, 1 second, Councillor Crawford. Alex, did you get everything you need from that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crawford?
So this, it's more of a clarification for me. So I'm just trying to read this. So the potential option, are you, may I ask the mover of the motion if you're asking to have this moved up? Because I believe this is part of the widening. Am I not understanding the report at all? Like, are you asking for this to happen sooner than the widening?
No, I want it to be included in the report, in the Harwood widening report. I just want to make sure it's being taken care of and is being addressed.
Let me try and help here, because yeah, I think we need to clarify this a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought that's what this was.
My understanding when we talked is, like, obviously you would like the crosswalk in today,
Yes.
but it's not budgeted. So I think, and this is the reason why it was done this way, is we will know probably in the next couple of months whether the other project is going ahead. And if the other project goes ahead, and Alex, I don't know how you want to word this, but if the other project goes ahead, then obviously we're not going to put in an $85,000 crosswalk when the Harwood Avenue widening is going to be advanced. But if that doesn't go ahead, and we know that the Harwood Avenue widening is still going to be 2023 to 2027 timeframe, I think we'd like to look at doing the crosswalk as an interim measure.
So then
So
I think,
is that the intent?
I think the amendment should reflect that. Like that whole.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is that the intent, Councillor Khan?
Yes, Mayor, that's the intent.
Okay, so how do we word this amendment Mr. Clerk, to give that direction.
Doesn't it have to be tied to that project then? And if the project falls through, then you still want the crosswalk to happen.
Before, yeah.
Wouldn't it be
Well,
best
the
to defer
crosswalk
this?
would happen.
Wouldn't it be
Pardon?
best to, sorry, excuse me, just wouldn't it be best to defer this to September when that decision will be made and we'll have better clearance as to whether the province supported the the proposed project, allowing us to make a better informed decision rather than make a decision now that's very up in the air based on what the province may or may not do.
But I think the idea though is that Councillor Khan doesn't want the crosswalk lost
Yeah, I want it
regardless.
recorded. Yeah, I want it there.
So he wants the cross, forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn. He wants the crosswalk in the capital project, in the capital budget, regardless of the project or the widening at this point. If that's the case, then that has to be reflected in the amendment, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's hold on a minute. As Councillor Lee was correct, we can do this one of two ways. We can deal with the amendment if we can word it and give specific direction, or we can defer this until September. The original report is just received for information, which is not doing anything. Why do a report and then receive it for information? That's not helping us solve the issue. It's also going to take some time to be costed, to have the design done, to have everything else done, if that's the way it's going to go. I'll ask for some direction from the clerk on the best way to deal with this at this point, given the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My opinion at this point is that it would be better to defer the matter so that you can make a decision in possession of all the information. I think if you get into sort of an if-then motion, Mr. Harris and I are kind of trying to have a back channel conversation here, and we're a little unclear on what that would look like. One thing I might suggest is instead of specifying the September council meeting, you might be better off to just defer the matter to the next council meeting, because it is looking like a distinct possibility that we may have a July or August meeting. So in that case, you'd have the flexibility to deal with it a little bit more promptly in the event that you have the information you require sometime in the summer, and then we have a meeting that follows before September.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Khan, would you be agreeable to withdraw the amendment and instead we defer this to the next meeting, or until such a meeting where we have the decision on the other project? Either one will happen, I think, before capital budget in December or October, November, whenever it is this year.
Yes,
And I think we'll have time from when that decision is made and we'll know all the information. And if we're not successful in that request to the minister, I think we'd have plenty of time to get the crosswalk put in the capital budget.
yes. My whole thing is that since I've been in office, I've been trying with this. I've been fighting for this. I just don't want it to fall through the cracks, like Councillor Crawford indicated. I've been trying for it, and I just want it to be included. So I don't want to
Right,
lose.
right.
That's all it is.
No, it would just be deferred until we have the decision,
Fair enough.
basically.
Yes, I would agree.
So,
to that.
Madam Clerk, if we say, if that amendment is withdrawn and we just defer this to the next meeting, if we haven't got that decision by the next meeting, is it just automatically tabled to the next meeting?
Yes, so just to address Councillor Khan's concern that, he doesn't want this matter to be lost, which I appreciate, perhaps we can just commit to including it on the agenda regardless. At that time, we'll reassess whether you have a decision on the other matter, and if not, it would just be deferred again until the next meeting, but we'll make sure it keeps reappearing on the agenda until such a time that you have that decision.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll take that motion to defer this matter to the next council meeting.
Yes.
Moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Lee.
Yeah.
So I've already got you on the original, so just be deferred. Okay. Any questions or comments on that?
Thank you, everyone, for your
Being
support.
none, those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, carried. All right. Moving on to departmental report 7.4.3, updates to user fees and charges policy, moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Bauer, that the revised annual review of user fees and charges policy ATT-1 be approved. Questions or comments on the annual review of user fees?
Chair?
One hand, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a quick question. So before this this policy was brought forward, I was just curious as to what was the preferred method for determining user fees and charges prior to this MPI policy.
Through the mayor to
Ms. Saran.
through the mayor to Councillor Bauer, departments would actually, there was a comparator. We would look at all the other municipalities. We would also look at our costs to provide that service, and based on that, it would be the departments reviewing and determining the appropriate increase. This is just gives us a more standardized process, and it takes into consideration all our costs.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Acting Director.
Anything further? Being none, those in favor? Any opposed? No, that's carried. Thank you. And finally, Ajax Public Library Board update, moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Dyes, that the Ajax Public Library Board update be received for information. Question or comments on the library board update?
Just a quick question. Yeah, or comment, excuse me. Just want to say what a great job the Ajax Library Board is doing, the Ajax Library is doing, especially in these hard times. They've managed to pivot. We've provided, through Councillor Crawford's actually suggestion, our laser printers to be redistributed for PPE. We have online content more than we've ever had before. We have a story time now. And we actually have a new chief librarian, Sarah Weisler, as well, who we've been meeting with on Zoom under her direction. So I just want to give a great big shout out to the Ajax Library. We've started curbside pickup along with phase 2. So I'm just excited to offer Ajax residents some relief to all of the stresses that they're going through the library. So just thank you for the library for that.
Great job.
Very good.
Excellent job. Excellent job.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
All right, being done, those in favor of the report, of the update? Any opposed? Being none, that's carried. Thank you. Before I go on, I was just texted by the clerk to remind me, sorry, I forgot. At the beginning of the meeting, I had explained to council why I was not visible and why I was on the phone, but I didn't mention it publicly after the meeting started. So I just want to state to the public, I've had some technical difficulties with the internet at home. I was not able to get on, so I'm actually only able to attend through my phone. And unfortunately, the bandwidth wasn't enough for me to do video and look at my agenda and do everything else all at once. So I'm attending, I have my video off. So that's the explanation. I do apologize for that. Hopefully I will have a new router in place by the next meeting, and we won't have this issue again. Thanks for the reminder, Madam Clerk. I did forget to mention that at the beginning. Regional council reports. Do we have any regional council reports?
Oh, that's me.
Councilor Crawford.
So our regional council meeting went 12 hours. We started at 9:30 and we finished at 9:30 at night. It was brutal. I'm just gonna hit on the highlights because that's all I remember. We had a big presentation on rebranding Durham tourism. It was very interesting, actually. We had a presentation on the AD, anaerobic digester, from staff, the organic management solution. Clarington actually put a motion forward that they are not a willing host for this location. There are concerns around land compatibility. It's not actually, I don't think, any surprise to anyone who sits on regional council, as there's a lot of residential outcry around this. The reality is that we are at capacity with the EFW, and hopefully we know for a fact that with the pre-sort, which will remove the organically and in non-combustible products, recycling, hopefully that there's some of the recycling will be marketed. We are losing a lot of money by not having a market for any of our recyclables any longer. And so we need to be able to come up with a solution. Let me see here. From what I understand, there's no additional, with an AD or a pre-cert, there's no additional admissions coming from either of these facilities. The location of these are naturally to be around the EFW because there's less movement of product, obviously. Anyway, there was also a motion that came forward from the Pickering councillors around having an investigation happen around what happened at Orchard Villa. And I believe that the province had already announced that they were going to do their own investigation anyway, and so this motion kind of became a moot point. But of course, ensued a lot of discussion. And the other, for Works Committee, we had a presentation on the phosphorus reduction action plan, and that there's an agreement now between York and, I can't remember the name of the company. Sean, do you remember the name of the company? It's
no, but just the consultant to put in the measures that were discussed through the PrEP plan.
Right. So I had asked that the agreement come back to council so that we could see what the agreement was. I was assured that the agreement was actually a standard agreement and there was nothing that really would be any differ. But what I have asked though is that the design of what the design comes out looking like comes back to regional council, because this phosphorus has been a fight of the Ajax Council for many years, as Joanne and our mayor know. And I think that it's important that we see that design to make sure that how this is designing Ajax benefits the most from, because we are not benefiting from this particular facility as it is. So that was agreed by staff that once the design is ready, it will come back to regional council and we'll all have a chance to take a look at what that design looks like. That's basically my report. I don't know if there's any questions, but that's what I could remember. It doesn't seem like it should have taken 12 hours, but it indeed did.
Very good. Any of the other regional councillors have anything to add? No, I'll just add a little bit about transit. Yeah, you'd think it was an election year, as long as these meetings are, all the politicking going on. But anyway, regional transit, June 8th, there was a number of changes made. Again, ridership is down about 70%, which is incredible. The region was on track to lose a little over $20 million through transit, because as you know, we stopped doing fare collection and had the rear door boardings. With some of these service level reviews and changes we've made to different routes, and by, as of July 2nd, reinstating fare collection, we'll be able to lower that 20 million deficit down to about 6.8 million, I think is the number off the top of my head, which is significant. It's still significant loss for the region, but it's a lot better than 20 million. So those changes came into effect June 8th, and the fare collection will come into effect July 2nd. There have been plexiglass dividers and all the proper measures taken to protect our drivers. And we will still be operating at reduced number of riders per bus, but I don't think that's an issue right now. As we enter back into phase 2 on Friday, we will sort of play that by ear as we go forward. Any questions on regional council reports? Okay, being none, we have moved by Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Lee. Oh, I've already said that. The regional council reports be received for information. Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Those are carried. Business arising from notice of motion. We have 2. The first one, Ajax Council Land Acknowledgement Update. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. It's a very lengthy motion. I'm sure you've all read it and asked questions. So this is something that I have been thinking about for quite some time. And I was able to take action now, which I think is very timely. June is Indigenous People's History Month, so Heritage Month. So I think it's a timely matter. And I just have felt that the current acknowledgement really isn't complete. It's not meaningful to the history or to the present circumstance of our Indigenous people, or I feel really speak to how we should feel about it. So, last September we had a survivor of the residential school come and speak to us, gave a presentation, we endorsed it. Last November we had the third diversity exchange. We had some excellent speakers. One of them was Pamela Palmatier, an expert. And it just got me thinking about how we can change, what action we could take to really deal and address and acknowledge the past, the present, and the future. So that is how I came up with the wording that I would like to use going forward, if I have your support, so that we make a fulsome acknowledgement in our meetings.
Okay, Councillor Lee is the seconder.
Nothing to add. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Nothing to add. I think Councillor Bauer said it all, and it's right. It continues to set Ajax apart as a spearhead for diversity and inclusion by being one of the first Durham Region municipalities to acknowledge that we're not even close to getting it right yet, but we're open to the conversation. So that's why I full-heartedly support this motion, or second this motion. Thank you.
I may,
Questions.
Mr.
I see Councillor Crawford and Councillor Dyes, but I didn't see whose hand was up first. Councillor Dyes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really do feel that this motion speaks to accepting the responsibilities, that it has more meaning in reminding us of the mistakes we've made in the past. And the diversity exchange was amazing. I learned a lot every time I go, and we have these diversity sessions, and we've had many different speakers come from First Nations to talk about their experiences, whether it was in the residential schools or whatever. And this was a real eye-opener. And over time, I've come to see that this is the land acknowledgement that we use today. Some of them do not agree with, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling knowing that it's kind of like a slap in the face to them, because they still have land that hasn't been properly claimed theirs. It's still under negotiations, and we still haven't really said that what we have done in the past is not right, and we will not move forward with it. So it's generations and generations of genocide, and trying to take away their culture, and it still continues today. And that point was very clear at the diversity exchange. So I think it's really good. It's short and to the point, and it says, yes, we've made mistakes, and we can move on, and we'll fix those. So we're committed to that, and I think that's really important. So I will support this, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Okay, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm all for, correcting anything that needs to be corrected for sure. My only question is around process. So as I understand it, we are looking to hire a diversity manager again. And I'm wondering, it's just about process. Is this something that we should have go through that process just to ensure that that everything is 100% correct in this changing? I'm all for properly representing our, I would never want to do anything wrong in this kind of totally, I'm blanking on words at this point. My only question, and I'll stop blathering on here for a minute, is that I'm wondering if this should go through a diversity manager once they're hired. That's all. That's my only question.
Councillor Bauer, to the question.
Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you for bringing that up, Regional Councillor Crawford. So I should mention as well that when I did start my research or do my research on this, part of it involved speaking to the diversity community engagement coordinator at the time. and then also a very fulsome request for consultation and input from the town's diversity and community engagement staff committee. So I did put it through the process for input. It was an open piece asking for true and genuine comment. So I feel confident that it was supported the way that I was hoping it would be. And as well as an aside, I also did receive comment from Pamela Palmentier, and she also fully supports it.
Okay. Can I ask one more follow-up question?
You have the floor.
Is there any actions, by changing the wording on this, is there any actions that are required from the town further than what we're doing now? I'm just asking.
Councilor Bauer?
Thank you, Mayor. So that's a really good question, and I asked the same. So the land acknowledgement should be, in my opinion, something that we don't just whip through it at the start of every meeting because it's on the agenda and it's part of what we do. It really should be words with meaning that we stop, we think, we reflect, we remember, and we should put expectation for us as a council, as a community, as a town to, I guess, think about it. What can we do? And move in that direction. So yes, I put expectation on myself and council that there should be further action. What that is, I think will come.
So that part of it would then go through a diversity coordinator or committee or whatever. Is that what you're suggesting after this would be accepted?
I would hope so. I would want it to go through. This should be, if we're starting every meeting with this, that should be something that's first and foremost in everyone's minds. And yes, that committee would also be involved, I guess, for education or for all of us, for consultation for what is our next step? What do we do?
So it kind of sounds a bit bigger than just changing the land acknowledgement.
I sure hope so.
Okay.
But this is where I'd like to start it.
Okay, thank
Further?
you. Nope, thank you.
Any other questions on the motion? I'm going to continue on, Councillor Crawford, where you left off. Continue on. That's my thoughts exactly, is that we're having wording in front of us today, but if you'd spoke with our diversity coordinator, well, he left, I think, in January. So the world today is very much different than it was in January. And especially when it comes to racism, when it comes to identifying and moving forward and respecting all the differences of everyone, it's a very different situation than it was then. But when I read this, I saw this as having some very definite action items, and I don't buy into the whole, well, I hope that will sort itself out down the road. If we're going to commit to changing the wording of a land acknowledgement, I want to know what we're committing to today, not down the road. I was very proud that we, about 5 years ago, were one of the very first municipalities to start using a land acknowledgement. And I know we went through the whole process and everything that I'm sure you did, Councillor Bauer, for this. And a lot of municipalities have followed suit. But okay, so I'll just go through this because I want to ask a question about it and make sure I understand. So, therefore, be it resolved that Ajax Council recommits to our part to achieving truth, justice, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And my question is, how? What are the action items that are going to go along with this? How are we going to recommit in achieving truth, justice, and reconciliation? Because if we don't have a how, then it's just words. We need to have action.
Do you want me to comment to that? Okay.
Well,
so,
yeah,
well,
that's
you know
the
what?
question. What are the tangible, like, what are the action items that come along with this?
Well, the very first thing I would say is when we look at a land acknowledgement, to me, it's kind of an apology, or that's sort of what the framework would be when we're acknowledging. And with an apology, you've got the 3 R's, I call them: the regret, the responsibility, the remedy. The current land acknowledgement really only looks at the remedy. We're going to move forward with kindness and respect. There's no actual display of regret, which is acknowledging the mistakes of the past. The responsibility, acknowledging that, guess what? There's still trouble today. Some of the circumstances for the Indigenous people are deplorable, happening today. So we need to be responsible for that by acknowledging that it happens, and we want to have true reconciliation so that that stops happening. So those are the two R's of this that I think are missing. My last consultation actually was in May regarding this land acknowledgement. There wasn't in January. So it's actually been paused because of the pandemic until tonight, but I think it is a very timely meeting to have it because of the month of the importance of the Indigenous History Month. So the action to say, what are we going to do? Guess what? We don't know what we're going to do. First thing though, I think we should be brave enough to admit that there have been mistakes and admit that there are still mistakes happening. And yes, we will move forward, but we need to own up to the past, reconcile the present, and move forward with kindness and respect. That's what I think makes this a meaningful land acknowledgement and not just something we rush through at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, first, I take a bit of offense to that. We don't just rush through it. A lot of thought went into the land acknowledgement that we had long before you got here. So I'm very proud of that. We don't just rush through it. It's something that's important, and we were the first to bring this in, or one of the first. So I don't think that's accurate. It's not something we just rush through without thought. It's something that had a lot of thought. And I want to make sure that we have as much thought if we're going to amend that, because that was brought in by, we went through the whole process back then and all the consultation and everything else. And looking at this, yes, we changed some words. So, let us acknowledge the mistakes and support true reconciliation by engaging and celebrating our Indigenous community. How? That's my question. I want tangible, how are we going to do that? Before we agree as a council to change this, I want to know the how are we going to do it. I don't just want words, I want action, and I want to know exactly how it's going to happen.
Okay. First, I will say I'm sorry that you took offense to my statement about rushing through the statement. Of course, Mayor Collier, I don't mean that the words didn't mean anything. I do mean that when you read them at the beginning of our council meetings, they're pretty quick. So that's all I meant. And I do also commend you and thank you that my understanding is you brought up the land acknowledgement at the regional level. So I appreciate that you did that as well. So that is what I meant, not that the wording was just some whimsy thrown together. In fact, it's not. And that's why it's so important that we make sure it's a meaningful engagement. So some of the ideas about true reconciliation was perhaps examining what town-owned property do we currently have that maybe we could look at giving back. Or perhaps we ask questions. We have once a year, we have a diversity exchange with a speaker who comes for an hour and gives a presentation. As we talk about, we have this diversity committee or a community engagement committee that currently has reviewed it and did have positive comments to this change. So we bring Indigenous people to the table, and then we ask them. We're not supposed to solve things by making them tell us, but for sure, I would like to know. Give us a tangible. So I can't.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut. I shared the wording of a motion that I'm bringing under notice of motion to enact or create an anti-racism task force. And that is going to be made up, assuming council approves it, that's going to be made up of leaders in our community. And I fully expect us to have representation from the Indigenous community as part of this task force. But Councillor Crawford also brought up that we're in the process right now of hiring a replacement for Jay for our diversity coordinator. It's a very important position. We've had a hiring freeze, but the CEO and myself has approved us hiring this position because of what's going on in the world today. And we feel the need of having this person in position sooner rather than later to help us deal with this, all racism and all the situation that is happening in the world today. So I've spoken to this, so I can't move anything, but I would support if somebody referred this, because I think it's important that the new diversity coordinator have an opportunity to review this and give feedback based on, but I would also like to have this feedback from this new task force that's going to be starting, because if we're going to do this, we're being looked at from all different angles. We can't just say racism anymore, because there's all sorts of different ways. And again, I'm saying I think we need to do it right, and I'm thinking it's now a lot different than what we've dealt with before. But we do have some more resources coming online in the not too distant future. So I agree with what you're like. I understand what you're trying to do. I just do not agree with putting the town in a position where we're agreeing to something without knowing what the action items are and potential financial going forward. So that's all I'll say about that. I saw Councillor Dyes first, and then Councillor Lee. Councillor
And I
Dyes?
would like to
Caller.
respond. I don't know when you want me to respond to that, but I just have one more comment to in response to what you've said, Mayor Collier. Thank
Okay.
you. Is just going back, I guess, to what, if we're talking about the land acknowledgement, so making amends or acknowledging what has happened to the Indigenous people, I also spoke to them. I got their support. I asked, what should we do? What do you want? This is part of what they want. Recognition that there was mistakes in the past, recognition that the mistakes are still happening, and commitment that we're going to move forward and commit to doing something. So it's not a matter of I did not look into that or check with who needs to hear this. From Indigenous people themselves, I got this would be a meaningful way to acknowledge and to start your meetings. So I did do my due diligence. I did ask the experts, and we still have that committee, the Staff and Diversity Engagement Committee. And we should also remember that their input at the time and throughout all of this, and our previous manager, Jay, that's still relevant and important to what I'm asking today. So that I just wanted to respond to what you said. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Dyes.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So I agree with Councillor Bauer. I have spoken to many of the participants at the Diversity Exchange and different cultural conferences that we've had in the past. I have learned a lot from First Nations on this, and I too have spoke to them personally about their feelings of the acknowledgement and the wording of the acknowledgement. And what they said to me was, if you don't acknowledge your mistakes, you don't move forward. I don't think they're looking for a fix at this time and place, but the acknowledgement means a lot to them as First Nations people. And it means that, yes, we see what we've done. We don't want to have these issues going forward, and we will work towards that. We're not soothsayers. We can't figure out how that's going to evolve, but it will evolve. We used to have a diversity committee. We can strike that up as the need arises, and perhaps that's the way to go. But there really was no committee at this point in time to run this by. But Councillor Bauer has done her due diligence in having that conversation with the community. And I think it's really important because it does send a very positive message that we are moving forward. We listened, the first, we've changed the wording, we've listened, and we're moving forward. And we can still do that in whatever capacity it takes us down the road with whatever committee comes into place. So, I think it's really important that we do listen and we do support this change. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
I think we're getting caught up in the weeds a bit from the original motion. I think a standard recommitting to our part in achieving truth, justice, and reconciliation, it's just something for us to use going forward, and nothing prohibits our the new diversity coordinator, manager, whoever, when they take the role, to suggest amendments down the line as well if they think this is not enough or more needs to be done. So I think that's why, like, the spirit and the due diligence that was done, I would support this based on the language. I think it's perfectly said, and any improvements, any action items can be discussed in future council meetings. Thank you.
And anybody further? Any last speakers on this? Councillor Khan.
Here, Collier, I've been listening to both sides, and I really appreciate what everybody is doing. Can I ask, when do you expect the new diversity coordinator to be on board?
I don't know. The position has been posted, so I assume it would be probably somewhere around the end of July, but perhaps, Mr. Baker, are you able to speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. I would hope that we get a good pool of candidates and we should be able to move forward. I hope to have somebody in place working for us by the end of the summer.
Very well. And the role for this coordinator is to guide us through these situations, correct?
Mr. Baker?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the role of the coordinator is to yes, provide advice to staff and council on issues related to diversity and inclusion.
Okay. And
I believe also, just to add, sorry, Councillor Khan, I believe the job description and title has been changed slightly to, I think, broaden the scope of this person for the new hire. Maybe not broaden, maybe more focused to the situations we're dealing with today. Is that accurate, Mr. Baker?
Well, it's true. It's generally the same position. It's not a management position. It's a coordinator position. But yes, to Councillor Khan's question, it would the individual would provide advice to members of council on this type of, which is the same as Jay did, as Councillor Bauer had mentioned.
Well, I'm listening to Councillor Bauer, and she has a really strong case, and I'm also listening to the mayor, and he's concerned about the commitments we are going to make towards this. And I am not qualified to comment on this, but if we have those employees that are taking care of this, if I may, I'd like to move this to refer to staff to look at this before we move forward with it, if I may.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? I see Councillor Tyler Moran's hand. We can't really speak to it because it's a referral motion. But as the chair, I will just quickly exercise privilege on that. But it's not a matter of not supporting it. I think Councillor Lee kind of hit the nail on the head when he said about, we can change it again. Well, I don't want to change it again. I think we need to put and I mean no disrespect, I think we need to run it by our new people and see how this fits with some of the new things we're going to be doing, so we don't have to amend it again. So we do it right the first time, and we're committing to things that are tangible and achievable. Because the last thing I want to be doing is I'll use my statement I put out on anti-Black racism last Tuesday. Again, people criticize because they say it's just words. We want action. We want, what are you going to do to help solve this? Don't just talk about it. Don't just do some words, but what are you going to do to help move this forward? And that's all I'm saying here is I want to make sure that if we're going to change this, that we're going to be agreeing to things that are achievable and tangible, and that we're going to be doing it right the first time. So that's all I'm saying. We have a referral motion, and
say one thing.
Councillor Tyler Moran.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to commend Lisa Bauer, Councillor Bauer, on bringing this up, and enriching the acknowledgement is a good thing, and I'm glad you've done it. But I'm also always think it's a good thing to go back to staff just to triple check in this case, because I know you've done a lot of work on it, but I just don't think it's a bad thing. But I commend you for looking at this and doing your work, and I think in the end we're going to have a better acknowledgement than we have now. So just want to say that.
Sorry.
Well, and to answer you, Mayor, of when someone says, don't just say words, tell us what you're going to do. Well, what we're doing is we are changing our acknowledgement so that it suits what they have requested and what they want, and the ownership and accountability that we take So that's an action item. That is not just words. The action item are the words. So please remember that. And
Fair enough.
I did speak to staff. I've spoken to staff many times on this.
Fair enough. So referral motion has been called. I assume this is time and place to be reviewed by the diversity coordinator once hired.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Did anybody call for a recorded vote? I thought I heard somebody at the beginning, or was
On
that
the
on the
main
main motion?
motion, but not on the referral.
Can I just add,
Councillor Crawford?
to that this be a priority to the diversity coordinator when they come in. I think that as you can hear, Councillor Bauer is quite passionate about this, and we need to have that same passion. And so whenever that coordinator is hired, that this would be the first priority for that person to look into, so that this can be addressed as soon as possible in our upcoming September. Hopefully, we're all back together again by that point.
Right. I think that's a given, but thank you for stressing that.
Okay.
So on the referral, those in favor? I see 1, 2, also 3, 4. Let's just do a recorded vote. It's easier because it's complicated this way. Recorded vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So on the referral, in favor or opposed, Councillor Bauer?
Opposed.
Regional Councillor Crawford?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes?
Opposed.
Councillor Khan?
In favor.
Regional Councillor Lee?
Opposed.
Councillor Tyler Morin?
In favor.
Mayor Collier?
In favor.
That carries on a 4-3.
That is referred. We will deal with that in September, probably after the diversity coordinator has been hired and had a chance to review. Moving on to the next notice of motion, moved by myself, second by Councillor Khan, changes procedural bylaw code of conduct. We're currently undergoing, I won't read the entire thing, it's been distributed to council and printed in the agenda. We're currently going through a review of the code of conduct as well as the procedural bylaw. So I thought this was timely, as I've identified a couple of instances where, for instance, we have made, oh, and sorry, I'm turning the chair over to Councillor Dyes at this point as I'm introducing the motion. Identified some issues where, like for instance, tonight we've got motions being brought on in 2 different ways. We have notice of motion on our agenda, but this term of council, we've never used notice of motion on our agenda. All the motions have been printed and dealt with right away. And what my concern is one, there's no notice, and unless you get the agenda the day it's printed, but 2, the residents don't have any notice to what's going on unless they show up at our council meetings, which we all know very few actually show up at our council meetings. So I think we're kind of going around the due process in the way that we've been doing it. It's legal. I'm not saying doesn't comply with the Municipal Act, but I think we're not giving the notice and the opportunity that we have always in the past. And case in point, well, Councillor Dyes and I, this goes back to since we've been on council since 2003, but also at the region, that's the way it's done as well. Notice of motion, it's introduced, it's printed in the agenda, it's dealt with at the next council meeting. That gives lots of opportunity for councillors as well as residents to look into it, do some research, ask questions, and then speak to it if they like when it comes back the next time, which is not something that is done at this point. And as far as the code of conduct section, there's some areas, again, we're in a different situation now. Times have changed. We're experiencing some things this term that we haven't in the past. And through the code of conduct review, I thought it appropriate that staff look at these 2 items. So that's all I have to say on that, and I'll open it up to questions.
Are there any questions, Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. To staff. So this procedure bylaw review, as the mayor was saying, this was planned to take place regardless. Am I not mistaken?
That is correct. We did have the review scheduled to be presented be conducted this year, and changes presented to council in September.
And this, in affects the procedure review of, in a sense, affects the first 2 points of this motion. I guess the removal. So I guess my question is regarding the removal of section 6.27.2, which the mayor was saying, we should be able to put a notice of motion in, I guess, like a month before, right? Like at the current meeting, I would put a motion in for the next meeting. And I guess suppose staff would need that in writing probably a week before the agenda goes out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Regional Councillor Lee. No, the process would be that the councillor who wishes to give notice of the motion would just do so on the floor at the previous meeting, and then it would appear in the agenda for consideration and voting at the next meeting.
I understand, but if something urgent were to come up, for example, Black Lives Matter, something very topical, that would require a 3/5 majority to put on the floor, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to
It's a
Regional Councillor Lee.
2/3.
That would require
Sorry, 2/3.
a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules to dispense with the requirement for notice.
Okay. How many municipalities, I'm assuming you guys did some research, use this method of motion right now? Because I believe the mayor said the region does this, but like the past few meetings, people would just put in motions into the agenda and they would be circulated via email, like not necessarily the full month before. So I'm wondering, like, how many municipalities currently use the prescribed method of 1A?
So yes, we did do a bit of a jurisdictional scan in anticipation of this question. So virtually every municipality has this option, the one where you can you introduce the motion at the previous meeting and it's considered at the subsequent meeting. The majority of municipalities also have the second option, which we have now, the one which is to just submit the motion directly to the clerk's department a prescribed amount of time before the agenda is published. So I'll just give you a bit of a rundown if you're interested. Within the region, Whitby, Clarington, Durham region, and the 3 northern townships all have that second option, but there are some examples of municipalities that only have the one option, which is what the mayor is proposing. Those would include Pickering, Oshawa, and Newmarket is another one that we found.
Okay, that's fair. Now, you guys were ultimately going to do a procedure bylaw review anyways, and do you know when that review was going to come to council?
Yes, it was forecasted for September.
So I'm not sure if you looked at it yourselves, but with the clerks, based on the language, would you have made this suggestion to remove section 6.27.2 in your September report, for example?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Regional Councillor Lee, no, this particular change was not on our radar. It's not something that we were planning to propose as part of that review.
Okay, well, I mean, like, listen, we like doing our due diligence. I would, for example, I'm going to propose an amendment to just strike out 1A from this motion until staff can provide us with the full procedure bylaw review, and then we can vote on that fulsomely when it comes to us. And I will need a seconder for that motion, please.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Bauer?
And my point, like just very quickly to speak on it, Chair, thank you, is, like we just said we don't want to do things without doing our due diligence through staff and making sure. Staff has just said they probably would not have suggested this. And realistically, as elected representatives, it's just another tool for us to use to bring motions to council. And I think this other way, if we remove this, we're going to see way more walk-ons, which we don't ultimately want to see. We want to be able to see wording and see, intent behind motions. So I think by removing this option and strictly going 30 days before, like, I don't necessarily know what motions I'm going to propose. 30, like, if you were to ask me what I'm proposing next month, I have no idea because, I'm focused on this month's agenda and this month's process. So I would just implore council to at least let staff take a look at it. And if they ultimately suggest it back to us, then great. We can also have another whack at it in September if the mayor wants to include this provision in. But I think right now, to make this decision without the full report, I don't think it benefits council or the democracy behind council. So thank you.
So just to clarify, Councillor Lee, you want 1A deferred back to staff?
No, I just want 1A
Deleted, I
removed.
thought.
You want it?
Deleted. Right.
Yeah, well, just want to make sure that's what you're, okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to, I guess, the creator, I guess to Mayor Collier. I thought the intent for this was that the whole thing goes back to staff anyway. It comes back to us with their recommendations. Because like 2 and 3, they're looking at clarifying and expanding all of the communication anyway. So through that process, if staff say we think that 1A should stay, then it stays. So I don't understand, like, isn't the whole idea is that this part just goes back to staff now to come back to council with the expanded direction of the communication? Because I'm certainly not going to vote on something that I don't know what that means. If you're going to change and expand the clarification of communication, I need to know what that means. So I think there's a lot more understanding that needs to be done under 2 and 3. And so would it not make sense to send the whole thing to staff and including 1A? And if it comes back that this should stay, then it stays. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. So I don't, can you just clarify that, please?
Ms.
Yeah,
Cooper?
that's no problem. No, I think the question was to me, Councillor Dice.
Yeah, it's to the motion, the mover of the motion. And the
So
intent.
I'll answer that quite clearly. That 1A is in there specifically, and Councillor Lee and everybody else knows exactly why it's there, because I've been very clear with all members of council why it's there. There's been many instances where motions have come and me as the mayor and head of council have had no idea what is coming on the floor, and it just appears, and my first indication of it is when it appears in the agenda publicly. And when I get phone calls from people, because maybe I don't read the agenda when it comes out on the Tuesday, maybe I read it on the weekend. When I get calls from residents, what's this, and I know nothing about it, as the head of council, that's a problem. And I have talked, wait, I'm going to answer this question. I have been very clear to Councillor Lee specifically, and at our last ward meeting that we discussed, because I hold wards 1, 2, and 3 meetings to make sure we stay within the Municipal Act, I asked very clearly just to give notice. I don't need to give direction or whatever. All I want to do is be kept in the loop as far as motions coming forward. And he was not agreeable to that. And I said, well, do you want me to change the procedural bylaw and the code of conduct? And he said, yes, I would like that to be done. That's why 1A is in there. And that happened at our meeting. Was it last Tuesday or the Tuesday before, Councillor Khan, that we had that conversation?
Tuesday.
I think it was two Tuesdays ago. But that's why that 1A specifically is in there, because that is time sensitive. Because we're going to have potentially meetings in July and August. And I don't want the situation that we've had several times in the past where motions appear that I have no knowledge of as head of council. And I don't understand why that's done. I mean, if you're introducing a motion, I don't think you should have to hide it from anybody. Any motions that I ever bring forward, I absolutely put out, except for one earlier today that I only got an hour before the meeting. But every single time, several days, if not a week in advance of the agenda coming out, I'm introducing this motion, give everybody the heads up and consideration, and they know it's coming, and the opportunity for them to ask questions. And unfortunately, in some cases, that consideration is not given in return. So that's why 1A is there specifically. If on the amendment, council wants to remove it and wait till September, that's fine. But that's why I put it in today, is because I don't want another 3 months of, finding out after the fact.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
My question was, is this going to staff to come back to council with clarification around communication and tools and supports. Like, like, how can what is this motion going to come back to us and say? That's what I want to know.
Ms. Cooper, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So just for clarity, item 1, if the specific direction provided in item 1 is not approved tonight, this matter will not be addressed as part of staff's report coming in September. The procedure bylaw updates that are coming forth in September are primarily just a number of housekeeping updates that are needed to the procedure bylaw. This was not on our radar as something to make recommendations on. So in the absence of council direction to advise on it, it would not form part of the report. Item 2, under the Code of Conduct, as you may recall, we're doing a comprehensive 5-year review of the Code of Conduct this year. One of the major weak points that we have identified at a staff level in the Code of Conduct is the communication section. It's very brief and lacks specificity. So that piece will certainly form part of our September report on the Code of Conduct. So I hope that answers the question. If 1A is not approved as part of the motion tonight, it would not form part of staff's report in September.
So Ms. Cooper, just to clarify then, the communications part number 2 may address some of the mayor's concerns?
It
with
may,
the process and, okay.
Sorry, that section is intended to deal primarily with how approved positions of council are communicated. I don't believe it would address the concerns that the mayor has outlined in respect to item 1 and notices of motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Question to the clerk. If 1A passes today, so we pass 1A as is, it would require a 2/3 majority to override it in spite of staff suggestions, correct?
So if 1A is approved tonight, then the option to pre-submit accounts or a notice of motion to the council agenda directly to the clerk's department is removed. Therefore, to submit a motion to be considered at the next meeting in any other manner than providing it at the preceding meeting would require a 2/3 suspension of the rules.
Sorry, let me clarify. Even if staff suggestion, even if 1A was not part of the September report, as you said it was not probably going to be, let's say staff ultimately says, you know what, we probably still would not have or would include 1A rather than remove it. It would require a 3/5 to override it, correct? I think that's my point ultimately is if staff suggests that we do this, sure, let's look at it, right? But if this is a very specific request from the mayor, then I don't think it behooves us to do this. And to the mayor's point, yes, we have some fantastic conversations regarding what should and should not be communicated. But I don't think there's a record of me having submitted a motion without where it just appeared on the agenda without being emailed first. So I as per usual, you know, every motion will always be emailed. That's fair game. I agree with that, but that's, you know, the mayor, for the mayor to say otherwise would be untrue. Every motion I've submitted has been an email to council for you to review, and then also in the agenda. So I just want things to be the way they are now. To remove this tool for us would be a huge disservice, and then it requires 5 out of 7 every single time we have something pressing, like we have 2 of them today. So staff isn't suggesting this. This is just the mayor's personal want. That's absolutely his prerogative. I just don't think it's something I can support, which is why I've asked for its removal.
Are there any other comments?
And I'll ask for a recorded vote as well.
If there are no other comments, I just have one comment. And I guess my concern also is when there are things come up in, you know, before a council meeting and we meet that 10-day deadline to get it in the agenda. But sometimes they're very current issues, as you spoke to, Councillor Lee. And, you know, to put it off a month, you've missed that window of opportunity to put the motion forward and speak to it where it had any real, you know, decision-making power and meaning to it. And I think that's a concern. And I think you're absolutely right too, as I see at Regional Council, that because of that setup, you see a lot of motions being walked on the day of a meeting. And that can be very confusing, and it doesn't give you time to do your research and give you time to, sort through your thoughts as to how you feel about that motion. So they're my two concerns as well. It's worked quite well for us the way it is now, and I think we can fix problems that the mayor speaks to without changing this. So those are just my thoughts. So
Councillor Dice, I'd like just to close up if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just to answer a couple of questions, and I don't want to get into a back and forth about whether an email was sent or not. I'd have to go back and look, but I wouldn't bring something forward if it just was a one-off or whatever. This has been an ongoing thing. But to the region, what you're referring to, all those require 2/3, which is the exact same as our rules. Whenever a motion is not submitted through notice of motion, it requires 2/3, and it's always been that way. And even for somebody to speak as a delegation, again, requires 2/3 if they're not in advance. So I think that's what you're referring to there. But it is the situation I'm discussing. There's no motions that are brought forward at the region and dealt with without being a 2/3 vote that have not been issued by notice of motion. I've done plenty, and I've been on regional council for the last 10 years. That's the way it is. I believe the clerk said that as well when she was asked if other municipalities do it that way.
Sorry, can we clarify with the clerk though? Like I just mean in section 1A. Again, I don't want to get in the weeds with this, but we don't always bring up motions at the end of the previous council meeting. I will submit a motion to the region. I will email it to them. They will say it's included, as long as it's 1 week before, the region then includes it in the agenda. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what this is. If we remove this, I can only bring up motions at the previous council meeting for the next council meeting, or I need to walk it on with a 2/3 majority.
And just to not belabor, but I believe those are notice of motions, and they're dealt with as notice of motions at the regional council meeting for the next meeting. They are announced, but I don't think the region allows you to just read the notice of motion. I think they need you to submit it in writing, but it's dealt with at the next meeting in absence of a 2/3.
My autism motion, like the letter, was sent to them a week before. Again, sorry, I just want to clarify that if this were to happen, then I would have had to have submitted it at the end of the previous meeting, which I don't think works. That's it. I'm sorry, Chair.
Are there any more comments or questions? Okay, so it's called for a recorded. Yes.
If I may, I just wanted to clarify staff's position in case there was any confusion. I didn't mean to give the impression that staff have an opinion at this point on the substance of 1A. We haven't had time to examine it yet, or in terms of arriving at a position as to whether we support it or not. I simply meant to imply that it wasn't a matter that we intended to bring forward as part of our September report. So our position is neutral on that at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then instead of going to this vote for this motion, can we not send the whole thing to staff and have it come back in September? Like I would like to have staff's opinion on the entire thing and have it come back with an expanded thing on the communication, like the tools and all that kind of stuff, and come back to us to have a wholesome discussion at that point. Because right now, I just feel like this is, I don't like where this is going. So I would like to just say, and I think we have a motion on the table, but if that fails, then I would suggest we send the entire report or motion to staff to have report back to us along with their report of the review of the code of conduct in September. Is that acceptable?
Point of order, Madam Chair. I believe the clerk has already said that this will not be part of their recommendation. So if this is referred, item 1A won't be part of their recommendation when it comes back anyway. Items 2 and 3 are just direction to staff. They're coming back regardless.
If it is deferred, if there's a request to have it deferred that staff look at it, then they do.
Yeah, but like, I get it. Like they don't have this on their radar. That wouldn't have been part of it. But now it has to be on their radar if we tell them to investigate
Correct.
and bring it back to us, right? So
Correct.
it doesn't matter that it's not on their radar. It has to be part of their radar now.
Chair
Correct.
Dye, if I may, I just might suggest to accomplish what Regional Councillor Crawford's getting at, if someone were to move that the word implement in clause 1 be changed to examine or make recommendations on, then I think that would accomplish what Regional Councillor Crawford is saying. We would be directed to examine it and provide a position on it come September.
Yes.
Councillor Lee, would you
Happy
want
to.
to make that change? Do you
Happy
mind,
to.
Councillor Crawford? I think that's what he intended to.
No, I wanted it
Is that okay?
removed, but no, for the sake
Well-
of it, yeah, let's have staff look at it. Happy to have them look at it. So I would move to amend section 1. So sorry, I removed my original amendment. This amendment, I would like to move that staff be directed to, sorry, clerk, the wording was
Examine.
Examine.
examine, strike the word implement, replace that with examine. And I guess I'll need a new seconder.
I'll second.
Councillor Crawford? Okay, do you still want a recorded vote on this?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then on the amendment, all in favor? Any opposed? So who's opposed to this? Councillor Ash? No, you're in favor? So I think I
Are
didn't
we
see
on the
your hand,
motion
that's
as
all.
amended now?
As a motion, yeah. So on the original motion as amended, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Back to you, Mayor Collier.
Thank you. Moving on to, oh shoot, I dropped my pen. Moving on to, what's next? The bylaws. Moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Crawford. The bylaw number, 1 second, hold on. Yep. Moved by Councillor Khan, second by Councillor Crawford. The bylaws number 19-2020 and 21-2020 be read a first, second, third time and passed. Any questions or comments on the bylaws? Being none, those in favor? Any opposed? None, that's carried. Notice of motion. Now we have, I believe, 3 notice of motion. I'm aware of 2, and then Councillor Bowery, you let me know at the start of the meeting that you had another. So I'll go with in order. Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Your Worship. I circulated a motion on Friday, June 12th, last Friday, with respect to speed enforcement cameras locally. Something that I think all of us have spoken about. We actually discussed it at length at the last GGC meeting. And I believe we will see, but should I read the motion now or do we first, how does it work, Your Worship?
Go ahead, just move by yourself, seconded by, I believe it was Councillor Khan, and just go ahead and read it has been circulated, but it's not printed, so just read it.
Okay. Whereas resident safety is a primary concern for Ajax Council, and whereas speeding concerns continue to increase as our population grows, and whereas automated speed enforcement is an additional tool to discouraging speeding without an increased burden on DRPS, and whereas the province of Ontario has amended the Highway Traffic Act to enable the use of automated speed enforcement technology to improve safety in school and community safety zones, and whereas on December 2nd, 2019, the province of Ontario passed a regulation which allows municipalities to operate an ASC program, that's Automated Speed Enforcement Program, and whereas on February 18th, 2020, Ajax Council endorsed the process to establish community safety zones, approved 2 existing and additional 10 community safety zones be established, signs be installed, and the traffic bylaw be amended. And whereas ASC aligns with the following section of the Ajax strategic plan, Focus area, leading in our community. Goal 5, invest in community safety. Action 5.2, which promotes safer streets by supporting new and innovative traffic approaches and initiatives. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Ajax Council, 1, directs staff to complete the sign installations in the 12 approved community safety zones as soon as possible, and to implement the 90-day warning period in advance of the new ASC deployment. And 2, that staff report back to council at the September 2020 GGC meeting with the cost to implement the ASC program, the recommendation of locations for 3 portable ASC units, and next steps. And if I may just add, before I hand it back to you, Your Worship, this is something that has been a passion and has been an action plan that we've been doing. All members of council, I think, have been doing their own due diligence. Certainly in Ward 1, we've got a lot going on. And we do know that the region has an ASC program, but it really just, you know, not to be negative about it, it is what it is, but it just really grazes our personal municipality with one, I think at this point, one existing. Whereas this local initiative would be a lot more intense, it would be a lot more local, and certainly a lot more proactive than the predicament that we're in at this point. So I would love if everybody could support this. And I hand it back to you now, Mr. Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Khan, did you want to speak as a seconder? No, you're fine. Any other speakers to this? Seeing none, I'm glad to see this coming forward. This came out of our GGC meeting last week. I feel that we're not moving forward quickly enough on this, so I'm glad to see this come forward. And again, staff will report back to us in September. We'll make the decision whether they want to move forward again. So thank you for that. If there's no further comments, those in favor?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for interrupting. A motion to suspend the rules is first required.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Sorry, to get this on the floor, we actually, and after the last motion, we should have known this. I should have known this. I need 2/3 to allow suspending the rules to introduce this motion. So can I see some hands? I need to see 5 hands to allow the introduction of this motion. I see 3, 4, 5, 6.
We need a
Okay.
mover and a seconder to.
It's moved by okay. I'll say moved by Councillor Tyler Moore and second by Councillor Khan that we suspend the rules. Those in favor? None opposed. That's carried. Councillor Tyler Moore moved, seconded by Councillor Khan. The motion has been read and discussed. Any further discussion? Being none, those in favor? None opposed. That's carried. Next item, I guess we need, before we bring on, I circulated a motion to implement an anti-racism task force prior to the meeting. I need 2/3 vote to waive the rules to allow that motion to be brought forward. I guess I'll be moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Crawford, of waiving the rules. Those in favor? I see 6 hands. That's carried. Thank you. The motion, I will read it because it's not printed in the agenda. It is a little bit lengthy, which I apologize. So let me get it here. So, and this is a draft motion for a mayor's task force on oh, there it is. Awesome. Whereas there's been recent protests throughout the United States, Canada, and Ontario, including the region of Durham, in support of Black Lives Matter movement, and whereas it's imperative to take pause and provide a space for Black voices and other members of the community to be heard, and whereas as an organization committed to supporting our racialized communities and protests reminds us yet again that we have a lot of work to do in addressing anti-racism, and whereas members of the community are calling on public leaders to take action on systemic and institutional racism to combat barriers felt by Black people, Indigenous people, and LGBTQ+ and other groups, Now therefore be resolved that council endorses the creation of a mayor's task force on anti-racism to run to the end of 2021, and then the mayor be authorized to develop and approve a terms of reference for the task force, and the mayor be authorized to recruit and appoint members and stakeholders to the task force, and that council endorses the provisions of specialized staff support to the task force, example, development of terms of reference, strategic advice, and guidance, community support as approved by the CAO, and that the task force be required to update council with its findings and recommendations prior to the start of the phase 2 implementation, and that any request for funding and resources to support phase 2 be brought forward to council for authorization, either as part of the annual budget process or separately from that process as needed. I'll just speak to it very quickly, and this actually ties into several of the other items that we've spoken to this evening. I during Councillor Bauer's motion, made reference several times to the situation we're in now with racism and, you know, being in between our diversity coordinator and residents and our community groups expecting action. And they are absolutely right. We can't be just speaking about things. We need action. We need a plan, and we need a plan put in place that's going to help us move forward, help us do things better, and help us address. And when I say racism, I use racism in my mind is a broad term which covers any kind of racism or negative against any group, not just Black, not just race. Could be whether gender, could be disability, could be age, could be any number of things. And that's why, and I know you'll have lots of questions, and I don't know that I'll have answers because we are just right now developing the terms of reference in who will sit on this committee. I see this made up of a group of community leaders representing all of our very diverse groups in the town of Ajax. I want them to be able to have the freedom to develop their own work plan and to be able to come back and report back to council with real, tangible, achievable measures and a plan for us to move forward as a very, very diverse and inclusive community. So that's all I'll say about this. It's an ad hoc committee. We put the term in there till the end of 2021. We could, as a council, decide to make that longer or shorter, but we felt that it'd be important that this be a council established committee, and hopefully will help us guide us moving forward, and ask for your support. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw this motion literally at 6:30 before the meeting started, and I understand you guys get the wording right, and that's not the problem. I think my problem is I ultimately think we have one chance to get this right, and it even starts with the naming of the committee. I understand your rationale of not wanting to focus on any specific thing. In fact, you even broadened it to include gender and everything else, but I think we have to name it. We have to name it properly. And whether it's your Twitter statement or even the beginning of this motion, this is specifically about anti-Black racism. And we shouldn't shy away from that. We should address that, because that is why this motion's even on the floor right now. And that's not to say that all of the races shouldn't be considered. We don't need input from other community groups. We absolutely do. But the problem right now is the fact that, you know, Black men and women in North America are indiscriminately being murdered by police, by other people, and there's a systemic problem. And so I think by not even naming this and just calling it the Anti-Racism Committee, it doesn't do it justice to what I think the focus should be, which is specifically anti-Black racism. Am I saying that there's no racism or discrimination towards other races? No, of course not. Indigenous peoples, no. Or the LGBTQ plus community? No, of course not. I'm a person of color, and I absolutely experience microaggressions, regularly. That said, even as a person of color on council, I can acknowledge that as unfair as the system may or may not have been towards me, it has been disgracefully unfair towards our Black community. We've acknowledged our deficiencies through, our First Nations diversity exchange. We didn't try to make that a racism exchange. Or we had Councillor Khan, and I was so proud of him. He represented the town in Ottawa as part of a delegation called Push Back the Darkness, which speaks directly about Islamophobia. We named it, and we said this word has no place in our town. So I would very much, I'll put through two amendments. I emailed them to the clerk. The first being that any reference to the mayor's anti-racism committee be changed to the Town of Ajax Anti-Black Racism Committee, because we have to name it. And that terms of references for the task force and recruitment and appointment of members be at the discretion of the Town of Ajax Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Ultimately, I applauded the mayor for suggesting this initiative. Sorry, I need a seconder on this motion before I speak to it.
I'll second it.
And Mr. Chair, if I may speak on it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was amazing that you brought up that you suggest this initiative. And, the first chance we all got, we all said, we want to be on this committee. But the more I think about it, the more I think the worst thing we could do is have any sort of politics associated to this committee. That shouldn't be the goal of this committee. That shouldn't be why people are on this committee. It should be because people want honest to goodness change over what's been going on in North America and how it's boiled over to a point where there's daily protests about it. And that's why I think we should change the name to the Town of Ajax Anti-Black Racism Committee. In terms of changing the terms of reference and recruitment, the mayor will do a great job setting terms of references and recruitment, but I think it would speak more powerfully if we use our own staff committee, which is made up of people of different races, gender, color, and have them select the committee and have them set the terms of reference, because I think that'll speak more to the community. And I'll just leave it at the point of we have one chance to do this right, and I don't want to dilute it by not focusing on the core problem. So I would appreciate council support of my amendments.
Okay, I'll try and respond to a couple of the points you made, as I feel they were questions. The reason why it's not anti-Black racism, I agree with what you're saying. However, that goes against the fact that we are a very diverse community and very inclusive community. And by naming it specifically, and I'm absolutely agree that anti-Black racism is at the forefront right now and is what we're discussing right now, I'll use the statement that I put out for on Blackout Tuesday 2 Tuesdays ago regarding the anti-Black racism, and I was criticized by both sides. I was criticized. I had people from the Black community reach out to me saying I hadn't gone far enough, and then I had people from all the other groups or many of the other groups reach out to me and say, what about me? We're an inclusive community. We preach diversity. We preach inclusion. We can't have a statement about one particular group and leave out everybody else, because racism is broad and applies to all the other groups as well. And that's why the name is the way, and I don't know whether the anti-racism task force will be the final name, but you spoke to politics, and that's why I don't think it's appropriate to have counselors or even myself, other than just sort of overseeing this, because I don't want this to be a stage for people to build an election platform. I don't want this to be anything to do with politics. I want this to be genuinely people in our community that are vested and want change. They don't want personal benefit, they want change. And they're doing it because of their vested in the community and because they're worried about the best interest and how we can move forward. Not about the next election, not about posting pictures and that I did this and I did this, but because they seriously they represent their groups, their communities, and they want to give meaningful information. So that is why it is sort of the way it is presented. The other thing about our accessibility committee is it is very much geared towards accessibility. We no longer have a diversity committee. It's now accessibility advisory committee because we're provincially legislated to have an accessibility committee. They're not the same. So to have them and their members oversee this and develop the terms of reference and do that doesn't jibe with our town vision as far as the racism angle. And that's why, so that's, I'll use your statement as the three questions. That's sort of why this was done that way. And again, this is going to be something that I'm going to work with staff on and members of the group. And then I want to be able to, once we establish who is going to be a member of the group, whether it's going to be just people representing different racial groups, or are we going to open it up to, you know, the Muslim, Hindu, you know, Jewish communities, for instance, or I don't know that yet. That's going to be established, and we're going to seek input from a lot of people in a lot of these other groups before we make those decisions. But this is just striking an ad hoc committee to address racism in Ajax, and it's not affiliated with the other. So I'll just leave it at that. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Bauer?
Yes, thank you for this motion. I wish that it had come earlier than 6:30 because this is definitely a huge motion with many points and things to consider. So I really would have appreciated the time to think about it. Thank you. But I understand. I do agree. I'm not.
Councillor Bauer, I did send you all an email on Friday. It just didn't have the wording of the motion, but it did outline the task force and the intent.
Understood. So the motion that I'm looking at, that we're voting on today, came today at 6:30. The idea came on Friday in your email. So I do want to say that I think it should be named. I do agree with Councillor Lee. It shouldn't be the mayor's task force. I do agree it should be the town, because we are all working. This involves everybody in the town. So it should reflect that in the name. And also speaking to the membership, you know, I think it really is important that we recruit the right people. If we go with the usual suspects who are very active in the town, then we're going to get the usual results. And this is a committee for sure that needs to be uncomfortable. It has to have people in the room who would never normally sit in the same room and have discussions. And Black Lives Matter, I think, should be the first topic of discussion because it's here. And it's happening. And we just had the most beautiful and wonderful, successful, peaceful demonstration in our town, organized and run by members of our town, young leaders of our town, who are clearly telling us Black Lives Matter is here right now, and let's deal with it. So I do agree that that is the focus. That is why this motion is here, I feel, or why the idea even came up to today, because of all of that action in the town and the call for action. So I do, I would love, yeah, I don't know that just the mayor being the person deciding who's authorized to be a member or who's authorized to develop, you know, what's going to happen. I don't know that I feel that that's a job just for the mayor. So I wanted to just make those comments. Thank you.
I actually should have turned the chair over to Councillor Dyes. I neglected to do so. So Councillor Dyes, please take over.
My apologies. Councillor Lee, you have a question?
You're muted.
Thank you. Just statements in regards to just what the mayor mentioned. You know, we have called out Islamophobia. You know, during the mosque shootings, we did not say all religions matter, you know, not to use that verbiage, but we said specifically we should not be targeting our Muslim brothers and sisters because of the faith they have. So there's a precedence for this. And again, we're not dismissing anyone else right now. Rather, we're saying this is the one that's the most important. My last point was ultimately, I didn't mean the accessibility community, but our committee, but I'm pretty sure we have an internal Town of Ajax Diversity and Inclusion Staff Committee. And yes, I'm telling them to do this, and they haven't asked or been asked to do this. But I just think a diverse group should set this off, select the people, select the terms of reference, select what the goals are, and then take it from there. And then to your point, we got to report back before the end of 2021 to see if those items are actionable. Whether DRPS is involved, we don't know. Whether Black student associations from UOIT or Durham College are involved, that's up to the committee. But to Councillor Bauer's point, we've had 2 or 3 diversity conferences and they've been great. But I don't feel that we've ever moved the needle on anything after those conferences. Rather, we do the conferences and then we say, great, we're still diverse. This obviously shows that we are missing something to a very specific community that is huge in Ajax. We have a huge Black population, not just in the town, but in my ward as well. And, you know, the first call I made was to those same Black community leaders. And they said to me specifically, Sterling, stop asking us to give you those answers. We've been giving you the answers and no one's listening, right? So do something positive, engage the youth, engage people we wouldn't normally consider to have proper change now. And it starts with naming it by calling the Town of Ajax Anti-Black Racism Committee. And I think, again, it should be a completely non-political group deciding membership and focus. And so those were my amendments. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions?
Myself, Councillor Dice.
Yes, go ahead, Mayor Collier.
Just, I can't support the amendments. I think it defeats the purpose. And honestly, I represent all residents and I represent all residents equally. And to name a committee something that is specific to one group in a diverse and inclusive community is, to me, not the way to go. That's the opposite of the way to go when we're talking about inclusion. Do you think if we name this the Anti-Black Racism Committee that we'll get buy-in from some groups, but there may be some groups that don't want to participate for whatever reasons because they don't feel it applies to them. Maybe they don't feel they would have value to bring to the table. It's named this way because we represent all residents. I understand right now it's very much focused towards anti-Black racism, but it won't always. But if the committee is named that, that's always going to be implied as the focus. And I don't think that it might help us with address the concerns of the Black community, but I don't think it's going to help us address the concerns of all of our diverse group of residents that we all represent, everyone. So I won't support the amendments. I think, as using Councillor Lee's words, we're getting in the weeds on this. This I thought was going to be a fairly simple thing. Actually, I was just going to do it myself outside of council and start the task force and just go with it. And it was recommended through clerks that if we did need to access any town resources, it would be better coming as a council resolution. So understanding that I could have just done this outside of council and avoided this last half hour, I mean, we are getting in the weeds on this. It's a good thing, and it's something that's a moving target right now. And I think it just needs to get out, hit the ground running, and go. And I absolutely agree with letting the members create their own work plan and, you know, their own meeting schedules and all that. Absolutely. I will not be doing anything to be even guiding that. Might not even be in attendance of that. Well, my job is just sort of be the go-between between the group and the town. I don't want this to be politically heavy and politically guided. And that's, again, why it's not the Town of Ajax thing. It's not this, it's not that. It's just the committee, and let them run with it so we get proper, fulsome, and legitimate answers and direction, hopefully. So I would ask that you not support the amendments and support the motion as is. Thank you. I'll call for a recorded vote, please.
Yeah.
So if I may, I do have a comment if there are none others. I think this is before us today, absolutely, because of Black Lives Matters. It's in the news and been in the news for weeks. And I heard loud and clear at our rally here in Ajax when somebody said, You know, people will tell you there is no racism against Blacks in Ajax, and there was an overwhelming response, a quiet but overwhelming response from the crowd that said otherwise. And it was really shocking at the numbers that were admitting that absolutely they had experienced racism. So this is the issue today. Having other people come to the table is wonderful if we know what this task force is tasked to do. And that's the issue, racism and what. So, I mean, if we all want this, we all want to move forward with anti-racism. But I think it needs to be clear moving forward what we're going to be working on if a task force is going to be struck. That's just my opinion. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you for letting me, and I apologize for the late comment. Under terms of reference, can this be drilled into under the terms of reference around the Black Lives Matter?
Mayor Collier, did you want to answer that question?
Is that something that
I'm not clear what your question is. Sorry, can you repeat it?
Well, I'm just like, I think that I don't have a problem so much with the name of the committee, but I do understand that the issue needs to be dealt with. Black Lives Matters does need to be dealt with specifically before as a priority, let's say, of this committee. And I don't know how we ensure that happens. I'm assuming this all falls under the diversity coordinator. It would only make sense that that's where it would land. Is there, I guess I just hear like that council is very interested in that this is the priority of this task force, and that we need to be assured that it doesn't get lost in the naming of the committee of the anti-racism committee. Am I interpreting that? I don't want to speak on behalf of council at all, but I've been listening to what everybody's saying, and it seems that the concern is the broadness of the name of it, but that that we need to ensure that this issue that we're facing right now is a priority of the committee. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I'll try and answer that. I don't want to tie the hands of anybody. I not want to, by creating this committee, I wanted to leave that up to the committee members to do their own work plan and make those, decide what their priorities are. Because that's the whole point. If we're just going to tell them what their priorities are, why do we need a task force? I mean, it's a matter of just turning it over to the leaders, and what leaders means is, again, still being determined. But I mean, I don't want to tie their hands. I don't want to. They know it's an anti-racism task force. That's their job. They know they're going to be dealing with anti-racism. So I think, and I trust the committee members, the leaders in our community will be able to sort that out. And as far as the diversity coordinator, absolutely, one of the things that's so far in the terms of reference that we've developed so far is that the diversity coordinator will be part of this committee as soon as they are hired. And that will probably be when I step completely away. Right. But this striking task force is not necessarily new. I mean, Councillor Bauer and Dyes struck a task force for homelessness. It can be done. It's being done this way through a notice of motion and a council resolution, one, to have council buy-in, because I think it's very important that we have 100% unanimous support, because I think that sends a very poor message if we don't. But also that, we may need some town resources. This is a lot bigger than, with respect, homelessness or whichever. This is a much bigger thing, and does fit into our strategic plan and everything else. So I mean, those are all very important, and I don't want to take away from any of that, but it's only being done through a motion right now rather than me just doing it. Because originally when I sent out the email on Friday, I was just giving council notice, this is what I'm doing. I'm creating this task force. I didn't put mayors in there, actually. That it was the anti-racism task force. And I think that's what I sent out to you guys on Friday. That was added in as this motion took. And to be very honest with you, I saw this finished product as I was pressing send to everybody at 6:30 tonight, because as I told you, I did lose internet access for the last few hours. So it's been a challenge, but it is something that it is a priority, and I think we need to move on right away. I don't want to get down in the weeds this far on it. I don't know we have, but one thing that's very clear to me by how political this discussion has gotten is that's why I don't want councillors on it. And I think I had that discussion with several of you over the weekend. It specifically does not want to have councillors on it because we don't want hands being tied. We don't want councillors. If we had all the answers, we wouldn't need a task force. I want this to be somewhere where our community leaders can have open, honest discussions and bring forward, hopefully, good direction and advice for us to follow as council. I hope that answered the question.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. I do have another question regarding the membership and the mayor choosing the members of the committee. So we talked earlier about having a diversity and inclusion committee review the land acknowledgement and the wording to make sure that we have it right and that it includes what should be included. So I'm just wondering, would that not make more sense, or along the same line, that this membership in this committee should also have the expertise and input from this committee versus the mayor picking the members? If we're looking at the same, if we follow that same logic of wanting to do it right, making sure it hits all of the targets, then we should ask our experts of diversity and inclusions to navigate that.
Would you be agreeable to that, Mayor Collar?
I guess the point is, we haven't yet. We have these committees, we have this, but we haven't yet.
I'm sorry.
Right,
Mayor,
and we have residents. We haven't brought forward recommendations. We haven't brought forward a plan on how to deal with this. If we have the resources, why haven't we done it? That's not a slight at staff. I'm just saying, I think that we should turn it over to the leaders in the community, because they're looking at us and they're saying, why aren't you doing anything? So I guess what I'm saying back with this is, tell us, give us direction on what needs to be done. Tell us how we need to deal with this, because we're not doing it. And, what ifing this now? Like I said, I on Friday, I was just going to do this and it would be done by now. And the terms of reference would come out and I just let council know about it. And, maybe down the road, if we needed anything from Ajax in support, then we would have had to do a resolution. And maybe that would have been the best way to do it. Maybe then we could have avoided getting so deep in the weeds on this, on a fairly simple thing that I think we all support. I think what I'm hearing is you don't support it because it has the word mayor in it. That's what I'm hearing. Well, that's what you shake your head, Council Lee, but that's what your amendment says. You don't like it to be mayor's anti-racism task force. You want it to be the town of Ajax. And that was sort of the whole point with the conversation that I had with a few people. Oh, what happened?
Sorry,
am I muted?
No. Councillor Collar, let him finish.
No. So, I mean, this to me, I thought would be a very, very simple thing. I thought everybody would say, great. Let's get on this right away because it is so important right now. And I'm actually kind of shocked that we're getting so deep into something that right now is just an idea. This is not something but because of timelines and because of the situation we're in, and we're not sure if we're going to have a July meeting right now, I felt that this was something that needed to be dealt with right away. And that's why it's here. And I said right up front, I haven't once said that this is any kind of finalized. This is something that, don't be thinking that I'm writing the terms of reference by myself and I'm going to have sole, pick and choose over who's going to be on the committee. I will make it very clear through the terms of reference who, the qualifications per se of the people we're looking for. And one of those qualifications that I feel very strongly about is that it's not going to be made up of politically not backed, politically motivated people. Because I don't want it to be political in any way. I want it to be leaders in the community. People like, I don't want to name anybody, but people who we all know who the leaders of the community are. We know the people that do things just because, that bring things to the table, that are active in our community, that know their communities and are the people that each community goes to when they have questions. Those are the type of people we want on here. So I don't have all the answers. I absolutely agree to that, but I think this is something that will, and that was the intent, sort of grow a life of its own through the membership. And I think it's very important that we leave them with the freedom to do that.
Councillor Lee.
So through the chair then, I'm going to ask the seconder if she's okay if we split this up into 2 different amendments. Councilor
Okay.
Brown? Okay.
Yeah, what are
And
they?
then the first one, can we just change the wording to the second quotation to the mayor's anti-Black racism committee?
Okay. Point of order, Madam Chair. I'll just make it very easy. I'll withdraw the motion. Thank you. The motion's now withdrawn. Thank you. Councillor Bauer, I think you have a notice of motion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll be bringing at the next meeting a motion regarding the food industry and food industry workers.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Moving on, confirming bylaws. Any new business notices and announcements?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. I wanted to make a note or just announce that next week on Thursday, sorry, I should have had the date. Thursday, June 20, next week, Tuesday, June 23rd at 7 o'clock, there will be another virtual town hall with the mayor and members of economic development and the BIAs. So the first one was very successful, lots of information. So they have planned another one. So I'm just letting everyone know there should be flyers floating around, I'm sure, with the details for that. That was my announcement. And I also just wanted to make sure I gave another shout out to the young leaders in our town who organized that very successful and peaceful demonstration on June 5th. I'm very happy that the turnout was wonderful and peaceful and meaningful. So I just want to make sure that they were recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other notices, new business notices and announcements? Being none, I have 2. First, this coming Friday and each Friday after until changed at 12 o'clock, I'm initiating mayor coffee chats. And this will just be on the Monday. My public schedule is published, and that you will see on the Friday, there will be a Zoom link each week for any member of the public to join in and just have an open forum, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. Just have a coffee, ask any questions, and just to be accessible. So that will be coming up starting this Friday, and the Zoom link is already on the mayor's Facebook page on the schedule. And tomorrow I will be announcing the kickoff an anti-racism task force. I'll be developing the terms of reference over the next couple of days. We will be putting out a formal announcement and request for interest for community leaders to join. And I'll fill council in more on that as those things come forward. Moving on to the confirming bylaw, we have moved by Councillor Lee, second by Councillor Bauer, the bylaw number 22-2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the Corporation of the Town of Ajax at its regular meeting held on June 15, 2020, be read a first, second, third time and passed. Questions or comments on the confirming bylaw? Being none, those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. And moved by Councillor Tyler Moran, second by Councillor Crawford, that the June 15, 2020 meeting of the Council of the Town of Ajax be adjourned. Those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Thank you, everyone.